For so long, the US and Canada have had the most incredible relationship. There was free trade, integrated markets, and completely globalized enterprises. Being a neighbor to the richest economy in the world, Toronto's economy has started to blow up with nasty tariffs coming from Donald Trump. Fears of recession and threats of occupation to make Canada the 51st state. The temperature has started to boil up. Cars, steel, aluminium, sports, tech gadgets, everything is at stake in the trade war. Who will be hit the most? Time will tell. But we need to know how Canada's economy depends on the US, and how can this trade war affect Canadians. To understand the issue, we need to look at the North American's highly integrated economy first. Bordered by three oceans, the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Pacific on all three sides, Canada and the US share the world's longest border, stretching around 8,891 kilometers, or 5,525 miles. It's bad that Canada's GDP per capita is currently more than 29% lower than that of the United States. Why is that actually? GDP per capita essentially reflects people's incomes and living standards. Furthermore, if Canada's is deteriorating, it means that their situation is worse than that of its neighbors. Why is this occurring? Around 10 years ago, when some huge US tech companies took off and the Canadian economy was rattled by a dramatic drop in crude oil prices, Canada's GDP per capita began to trail significantly behind that of the United States. The Toronto Stock Exchange has lagged the S&P 500, which is another cause for concern. The efforts of a few large IT corporations have had a significant impact on US markets. The light blue line, on the other hand, implies that American stocks would continue to outperform the TSX, even if the S&P 500 were evenly weighted to reduce the impact of these titans. The idea is that, overall, American enterprises have dominated Canadian ones. By spending significantly less on research and development than the United States, Canada is preparing for future mediocre results, as if they weren't already slipping so far behind. This suggests that Canadian enterprises, government labs, and research institutes likely lack the financing required to generate inventions that could result in large economic gains for the country. As we can see, Canada's primary stock market has lagged behind the rest of the world. Therefore, Canadian businesses haven't suffered significantly. The country is simply smaller, has fewer enterprises, and lacks the digital superstars that the United States possesses to enhance its markets. Without question, Canada's R&D expenditures are significantly lower than those of other countries. However, given the size of the population, it boasts a considerable number of researchers. They are merely underfunded. However, its markets are uncompetitive. Oil and other low-growth businesses have an undue amount of weight on the stock market. Many Canadians are struggling to pay for basic essentials such as food and housing. Furthermore, the OECD predicts that Canada's advanced economy will do poorly during the next decade. This is very different from Canada's previous achievements. Canada thrived in the early 20th century because of its enormous natural resources. They produced and exported several natural resources, including lumber, uranium, nickel, gold, diamonds, and petroleum. Following World War II, manufacturing and immigration soared, and US and UK investment helped Canada become a rich country. Also, Canada boasts the longest coastline and is the world's second largest country, with access to the mostly undiscovered Arctic to the north and the vast Pacific and Atlantic Oceans on either side. It has enormous trading advantages. In addition to possessing the third largest proven oil reserves and ranking fifth in natural gas production, it is a net energy exporter and has significant amounts of critical minerals required for the green energy transition. Naturally, it shares a border with the world's largest economy. This indicates that Canada should be a significant economic force, yet it is not. The main impediment to the country's progress is low productivity. What then is the explanation for Canada's low productivity? For starters, services account for more than 70% of Canada's GDP, making them the most important sector of the economy. The reliance on temporary workers for low-wage employment has caused a downturn in that industry. The combined activity of the manufacturing, construction, utility, and agricultural sectors has also fallen over the last 20 years. So, what makes highly productive economies? Everything depends on the people and the equipment. Productivity is influenced by giving workers better physical tools, such as machinery, using new technology to boost output and efficiency, improving workers' skills and training, and making better use of labor and capital. Immigrants offered knowledge and skills that helped to fuel economic growth throughout the 20th century boom. Immigration's impact, however, has recently broadened to encompass inflation, living standards, and government budgets in addition to GDP. A notable difference between contemporary newcomers and their predecessors is that a higher proportion of them are unskilled. Any nation that wants to grow beyond its current size needs three things in order to produce anything: land, labor, and money. Things like a younger, healthier population and better education lead to better labor. Natural resources and ideal sites, such as those close to water supplies, make land more productive. Additionally, capital is the stuff that creates more stuff, such as infrastructure or machines, whose value rises with each new investment. Furthermore, enhancing one of these elements will benefit the other two. Modern fertilizers, genetically engineered plants, and mechanical equipment, for instance, would increase farming's efficiency, reduce waste, and increase food yields from frequently small area, while simultaneously lowering the amount of physical effort needed. Being a neighbor and having a close economic relationship with the United States, Canada has developed its economic policies and practices in response to the influence of its southern neighbor. For example, American companies have established business operations in Canada primarily to avoid tariffs or taxes, but headquarters and intellectual property often stay south. Many new and exciting startups in Canada are being acquired by foreign companies, especially American ones. This is partly because when small Canadian companies go public by selling shares on the stock market, they lose tax benefits. Therefore, these companies are more vulnerable to being acquired by larger foreign firms. All of this has made the economy less productive and innovative than America's. To put the difference into perspective, Canadians make around $60,000 per year on average, while their American counterparts make around $80,000. In other words, by traveling just a few hours south, income increases almost 33% on average. Furthermore, Canada just cannot compete because of the much greater level of investment in the USA. They have more innovative businesses, better tools, and more powerful corporations. The truth is that over the past 40 years or so, Canada has been gradually deteriorating in many of the above-described categories. Natural resources, which formerly accounted for 26% of the country's GDP, currently make up less than 12%. Manufacturing is only providing roughly half of what it was in the 1980s, while agriculture was at 5% and is moving downward to around 1%. Naturally, since this is a percentage, another factor is replacing it. The majority of wealthy individuals are pushing the system towards financialization, investing their money in real estate, and an aging, non-working population that prioritizes healthcare are the two main factors that have altered these statistics over time, putting the Canadian economy in the midst of a retirement phase. It's also the reason why Canada's lost decade, or decades depending on your point of view, has, for the most part, escaped international attention. Despite all of the dramatic headlines surrounding the housing crisis, the majority of Canadians used it to build a sizable nest egg for themselves, particularly after the pandemic, which reduced delinquency and reduced the number of available homes while maintaining artificially high prices. And this has proven to be a major obstacle, particularly in relation to Canada's quiet competition with the noisy bald eagle. The Canada of today is significantly different than that of even 10 years ago due to an aging population and a strong aversion to risk. The industry has become less inventive and more centralized. Instead of investing in companies that genuinely create sustained value added, investors are likely to put their money into Canadian housing. There would have to be a compelling argument for investors to choose Canada over the more inventive, financially stable, and business-friendly United States if they were interested in making corporate investments, and the nation simply hasn't been able to offer that explanation up to this point. If Canada weren't so expensive due to all the investment in real estate, this would be fine. Instead, businesses receive less funding, which means fewer are started, and they have fewer tools, which means their workers can't produce as much, which means they can't get paid as much. The GDP per person appears to be dropping, despite the fact that new immigrants are clearly increasing GDP. In Canada, sectors such as agriculture and hospitality that rely heavily on migrants for labor often have poor wages and unfavorable working conditions, as well as no degree or experience requirements. Meanwhile, the migratory boom is doing nothing to benefit higher-paying industries that need training or experience. Thus, there is concern that low-skilled migrants are lowering wages. GDP per capita numbers, however, do not provide a whole picture. Given its aging population, Canada urgently requires more immigrants, but it must also make bigger investments in them. However, firms haven't made any recent investments. Investments per worker has declined, and corporate investment in Canada has been low since 2015. Labor productivity has fallen due to a 20% decrease in investment per worker between 2006 and 2021, which is significantly low in comparison to other countries. Over the last 2 decades, Canada's real estate market has thrived, weathered the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2009, and outperforming the majority of other countries during the COVID-19 epidemic. The average home price in Canada has more than tripled since 2000, although in the United States it has only climbed by more than 60%. For the first time since at least 1980, the median home in Canada is worth 10 times the median household income. As a result, while Canadian earnings have risen, property prices have risen even farther. The average Canadian's annual income has climbed from $35,937 in 2003 to $62,636 in 2023. Nonetheless, throughout the same period, the average home price increased from $207,510 to $678,282. Many people feel that the 2 main drivers of Canada's successful real estate market are a scarcity of properties, particularly in major cities, and an increase in immigration. However, like with every good story, there is hyperbole. According to the central bank, speculators, including speculative gamblers, now account for 1 out of every 5 house purchases. This shows that a lot of money is being invested in the market, which drives up real estate values. However, Canada is very vulnerable. Household debt is disturbingly high, accounting for approximately 185% of disposable income, and this comparable to what it was in America before the subprime crisis. The majority of that borrowing has been for houses. In relative to disposable income, housing costs in Canada are approximately 34% higher than the historical norm. Comparing Canada to its southern neighbor demonstrates that, while not on thin ice, it is skating into dangerous territory. America and Canada are economically intertwined. Every day, almost 400,000 people and $2 billion in commodities cross their 9,000-kilometer common border. Given that the GDP of the United States expanded by 27% and that of Canada by 25% between 2009 and 2019, it is not surprising that the 2 economies have largely followed each other's lead in recent decades. In 2019, the country was marginally wealthier than Montana. Currently, it is somewhat less wealthy than Alabama. Since 2022, Canada's economy was behind America's, showing a more recent separation. What's under the hood is the root problem, not a stumbling block. 2 of Canada's growth engines have failed. The services sector, which accounts for more than 70% of Canada's GDP, comes first. Canada's services industry, which is reliant on government and consumer demand, has been assigned increasing responsibility for driving the country's economic growth. Canada's petroleum sector accounts for 16% of exports, making it the second decreasing growth engine. Following 2014, when a decline in oil prices damaged its fuel-dependent economy, Canada underinvested in new production for several years. In contrast, American consumers cheered as oil-producing states suffered. Investors increased their support for American shale producers after prices rose following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the country's oil production soared dramatically. Oil is one of Canada's most productive businesses, therefore its decline harms the overall economy. Honestly, Canada is not becoming poorer, but it seems like Canada has two options: learn from its neighbors and develop its own digital superstars, or stop comparing itself to the United States and be content to do its own thing. Without a doubt, this will require a great deal of patience, as well as greater R&D expenditures, competition, and investment in moonshot breakthroughs. Although the country is enormous, the majority of its population lives in a few spots along the US border because most of the terrain is inhospitable, despite being rich in resources such as fresh water, which is becoming increasingly limited around the world. There are ways for Canada to recover. For instance, they have a serious problem with the infrastructure deficit in Canada, which is costing them more than $200 billion to address. Long-term employment and chances to promote skilled workers would be promoted if government funds were redirected toward creating long-lasting improvements. The political structure of Canada, which places a large financial load on the cities and essentially makes many of these problems someone else's business, is one of the more subtle reasons why this has proven more difficult to resolve. There is also the climate problem. Compared to temperate, arid economies, the nation's harsh environment is hard on infrastructure. In the cold and the rain, things simply break down more quickly. Looking at the northern part of the country, where material transportation is a significant expense in and of itself, just makes this more challenging. Although it is highly unlikely that Canada will overtake the United States in terms of incentives, it is still possible to slow the exodus of its citizens by investing in improved automation and industry tools, and by striving to increase the purchasing power of more modest incomes, particularly in the housing market. To their credit, they have only lately begun to do this, but in order to make up for lost time, they will need to take a much more active approach. The only issue is that they don't have much to spare. They cannot afford to wait, given the rapid rise in immigration, home debt that exceeds GDP, wealth inequality, catastrophic brain drain, and a brief loss of leadership. It will be twice as difficult for Canada to pull itself out of this hole, since it has not taken preventative action. Lately, a shift in economic philosophy is emerging that is potentially as profound as the rethinking unleashed by John Maynard Keynes after the Second World War, or that pushed by neoliberals in the 1980s. And if the odds are true, the tariffs could swing North America, and especially Canada, into its worst recession and nightmare.